All right, let's get into our next discussion now. The 36 states of the Federation in Nigeria are heaving a sigh of relief as the federal government just released the second tranche of refunds of over-deductions made on their accounts by the Debt Management Office for settlement of Paris and London clubs' debts.
Now, the federal government had released the first tranche of the monies earlier in the year. The money is a monthly first-line charge of the loan from Paris and London club debts between 1995 and 2002.
Yeah. Though many Nigerians have heard about the Paris club refund, not many really understand it. Now, some people see it as a bailout from the federal government to the states. Well, it is not a bailout.
It's not.
Let's give you some background information on the Paris club refund.
Now, the Paris Club is a group of officials from major creditor countries who help find workable and sustainable solutions to the payment difficulties experienced by debtor countries. Paris Club creditors provide debt treatments to debtor countries in the form of debt relief by postponement or reduction in debt service obligations during a defined period.
Now, before former President Olusegun Obasanjo got elected into office in 1999, Nigeria was heavily indebted. As at early 2000, Nigeria owed the governments of the United Kingdom, France, and other aid-giving countries about $31 billion. And in 2005, the creditor countries proposed an unprecedented deal that cancelled all of Nigeria's debt to them in exchange for a cash payment of roughly $12 billion.
Now, the write-off was $18 billion, or 60% of the debt. The proposed deal was unprecedented because the Paris Club had never before agreed to a buyback of debt at a discount before that time. The proposal was driven by former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. And after the payment and forgiveness of the debt, the federal government compiled the portion of each of the states and the Federal Capital Territory FCT and commenced a monthly deduction at source from their federation account allocation.
But during auditing and reconciliation of accounts, it was discovered that the Debt Management Office of Nigeria had over-deducted monies from the state's statutory allocation account to service the debt. Now, the Paris Club refunded the excess amount to the federal government through the CBN for the states to be reimbursed.
And following a downturn in the economy and states unable to pay workers' salaries, they began to mount subtle pressure on the government to refund the excess. Now, in November 2016, President Muhammadu Buhari approved a total of 523 billion naira to be disbursed to states as the first tranche of reimbursement for over deductions on external debt service. However, 516 billion naira was released as the first batch. Based on the schedule of reimbursement, which was released by the Federal Ministry of Finance on June the 9th, 5 states got the highest amount of the refund from the federal government.
And the states are Rivers State, which had about 34 billion naira, Delta State with 27 billion naira, Akwa Ibom State with 25 billion naira, and Bayelsa State with 24 billion naira, and Kano State with 21 billion naira. Now, these 4 states and the FCT got the lowest amount. They are Adamawa State with 10 billion naira, Benue State with 13 billion naira, Ondo State with 14 billion naira, Taraba State 9 billion naira, and the Federal Capital Territory 1 billion naira.
Now, for the recently released second tranche of the Paris Club refund of 243.8 billion naira to states, Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, Delta, Kano, and Rivers got the highest amounts of 10 billion naira each. And these 4 states and the FCT received the lowest share. Maybe we should just leave it there for now. Of course, a number of states got an average of 4 billion and some 6 billion in this second tranche. But at this point, let's just introduce our guest, Professor Chukwudu, maybe.
Chris Mokobia.
My pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
Now, with this second tranche of 243 billion naira, and hearing from the Finance Minister, Kemi Adeosun, that they're reviewing the impact of the first tranche of 500 and something billion, does it make sense at all that this second tranche was released now, especially where you have workers still complaining that their salaries, their pensions have not been paid?
First, I think that we must not remove from the fact that it is their right. It monies owed the states. Then the second angle is that when the first tranche was released, it was agreed that they should pay workers with the monies. Unfortunately, we've been hearing and receiving information from the EFCC as to misappropriation of the resources. Now, what is important, and I want to go a bit philosophical here, is the fact that every so often you discuss workers, every so often you discuss the states. We remove from the fact that in Nigeria, predominantly, it's either a governor is a Christian or a Muslim. And the Holy Quran says, do not allow the sweat dry on the body of the laborer before you pay him his wages. The Christian scripture says that the laborer is worthy of his hire. And on Fridays like this, people will assemble at the mosques. Most of these people who owe worker salaries after receiving the pari refund, foreign refund, will sit on the front mats. On Sunday, the governors who are Christians will sit, perhaps when they go to church, at the front pew. And then you ask yourself, what do they make of this pristine and esoteric injunctions? What do they make of the demands of faith? I say this advisedly because they work. They take security votes, they take their allowances, they take salaries, and those who are the lower rung are left unattended. And, you know, sadly, when I listened to the Minister of Finance talk about the fact that they would follow up the funds and ensure that the monies are judiciously spent. And then the first question is, how well have we followed the first tranche? And that's Ngozi's question. But I do sincerely want to say here that governance sits on a tripod, essentially, in the Nigerian enterprise. The first leg of the tripod is the big brother, the federal government, with respect to these funds. And then you have the state government, and then you have people, the workers, you know. But unfortunately, we refuse to interrogate leadership. We refuse to engage leadership. And that is why, for the first time in about 19 years, remember towards the end of Absalam Abubakar's regime, we saw a few bit of labor agitation. And then under Oshomole, well, it was Komsi Komsa, but we saw labor. Now, we don't seem to see labor. They don't seem to agitate strongly. Their workers have been owed, and is either Ajero's faction is quiet or Waba's faction is complicit. And you ask yourself, who cares about the Nigerian worker? Now, I think that essentially it's been a section, very tiny section of civil society and indeed the media that are beginning to agitate. And that's why we're talking about this parish fund refund. Save and except the federal government through the investigative agencies, the EFCC, keeps a close eye on the state governors. They will do the same thing they did with the first tranche to the second. But with all sense of respect, I think that with a state like Oshu that expended sizably, that was how they were able to cut down the salary owed workers. I think a few other states have been, but for a state like Delta, my home state, that got well over 27 billion and is still owing workers' salaries. I ask myself what happened to the conscience of leaders at that space.
All right, Chris, let me ask you this. You started by saying that certainly these monies are the rights of the state.
True.
So, if it is the right of the states for this monies to be given to the states, does the federal government, because I just want us to have a basic understanding, does the federal government have the right to monitor what the states do with this fund when it is not a grant from the federal government?
First, that's why you have anti-corruption laws. Okay. That's why you have anti-corruption agencies. That's why you have the EFCC, the ICPC, and several other agencies. You have the right to follow. The monies belong to the people, not to individual governors. The money is meant to serve certain, for God's sake, you have responsibilities to your workers. And so if the federal government is saying, these monies you ordinarily did not think they were just going to come like this, and now they are coming, pay salaries, use them judiciously, because there's no better way to use them judiciously. than to pay your workers. That's actually why
it's the welfare of workers.
Yeah,
it's
that's actually why I started with the Quran and the Bible. You know, the reason we are here on planet Earth is perhaps to do God's will, affect the lives of people, and if you're a leader, serve the people. And if you fail to pay your workers, then you have not only offended God, you have offended the Constitution and the law of the land. And so I think that the time has come for us to continue to insist that the least governors should do and leaders should do is pay workers.
Now, between the first tranche of 500 billion and the second one of 200 and something, that's about 700 billion, almost a trillion naira. How sustainable is it when we use such funds actually to pay salaries? And then what happens next year? We're back in that same cycle. How about using these funds for more sustainable projects like providing infrastructure and all of that, that could provide employment and other benefits?
Because it's a smart one, but that's why you have a budget. That's why, if you like, this fund appears like an added tip on government.
It's like a bonus.
It's just like a bonus to government. And so that's exactly why the federal government is saying, since you're owing salaries, use them to pay salaries. You already have budget for capital projects. You have budgets for recurrent expenditures. Where you have budgets to invest resources on certain long-lasting
a budget
projects.
That the finance minister has said is not enough to deliver on its promise.
No, that's a federal budget. State governments have their budgets. And now, what you do with your budget as a state government is left to you as your exclusive preserve. But now that you have something that looks like a bonus, pay your workers. And I think that the time has come for us. That's exactly why this debate will not abate until Nigeria looks that way. That's why Nigerians are talking about the need for restructuring. I'll give you a practical instance. Nobody should pretend a state over states like we do here. It doesn't obtain anywhere in the world. If these monies were not deducted from the states, and the people, as it were, if you're a citizen, an indigene or Delta State, for instance, you know that all your resources comes to the state government through the local government, and that all your state governor does is pay certain amount as tax or emolument to the center. You're able to hold your governor accountable. In this present situation, they always have an alibi. Now you're talking about refund. The state governors will tell you, oh, they didn't actually pay all the 10 billion for the 5 major recipients this time. They didn't pay all the 10 billion. They said they will pay in tranches again.
Yeah,
and then how do you investigate it? How do you follow it out? But you know, when there is something incumbent on true federalism, ownership, all over the world, if you own a property, the tendency, your proclivity is to take good care of it. Unfortunately, every other person's property, everybody's property is actually nobody's property.
Nobody's property.
So nobody seems to care. But you know, when the workers know exactly what each local government owns or receives, and then they know exactly what goes to the state government, and they know exactly what the state government pays to the federal government, they're able to hold leadership accountable. That's why you have that Christian saying that if the foundation be faulty, what can the righteous do? We have a faulty foundation, a faulty system that allows for corruption. It is corruptible and corruptive. And save and except that is corrected, these governors will continue to do what they're doing. But you know what? Somebody must watch them. And the owners of resources should be able to watch them. Unfortunately, the system we run today does not really have ownership. Everybody, Abuja is like a place where you come to take what you want, and then you go back home. And that is why corruption wears an ethnic garb. When you put a man to trial, they'll say, oh, it's because he's Igbo. You put a man to trial, they say because he's Yoruba, he's Hausa, because nobody seems to have ownership. It's a sense of ownership that's incumbent on true federalism does not exist here.
All right, how justiciable is all of this issue when it comes to the management of funds like this? When other issues are involved, we see people go to court to get injunction or court orders to ensure that the states or whoever is involved does these things like this and like that. How justiciable is this? To compel the states to actually pay or use these monies or funds for salaries?
You know, strongly, again, when we ask these questions, it will take you back to the structure. But, you know, Chapter 2 of the Constitution actually provides for welfare of people as some kind of platitudes, some kind of positive morality. It is almost, unfortunately, not justiciable. You know, you can't go to court to say, oh, because the governor did not tar my road, I lost a cousin, and so I want remedies. You can't do that. And that's exactly why we're saying that the time to rework our constitutional normative is now. The time to rework our structure is now. So that you can, like other climes, say to the government, because you did not provide CCTV here, because you did not provide security posts here, I lost a cousin, I lost an uncle, I lost a sister. And then it becomes a major responsibility on government. Save and except those things are done, you know, you almost will find it impossible to insist that government does certain things. And then the only fallback is agitation, public protest, like that's why you have the NLC, that's why you have the TUC. But how effective are they in the Nigerian situation? Unfortunately, most of them have gone to sleep, and the agitation for the welfare of the Nigerian worker is at best comatose.
So, in other words, nobody is going to take responsibility for the alleged diversion of these funds, this Paris fund refund. Is that what it means?
The only way to hold anybody responsible is what EFCC is doing now. We have that certain hotels and certain properties that some individuals bought with the monies have been impounded. We hear that some governors have been secretly investigated. Of course, you can't take any action against them until they leave office. But the truth is that appears the only way out now, except the federal government decides to go into a major brickbat with states and says, okay, I won't release the third tranche until you show us your papers as to how you have paid worker salaries. But I think that the time has come for us as a people, as a nation, and as a human constituency to think about the next man. If a governor swore to the oath of service, the oath of office is an oath of service. It's a social contract of sorts. If you swore to serve the people, serve the people. If you swore to pay salaries, pay salaries. Why do we continue to treat humans with some kind of an air of wickedness? Because that's exactly what it is. You know that the worker with families, with children to take care of, with school fees to pay, has served his state the best way he can, and then you don't want to pay him salaries and you have monies. You're investing them in private estates, and you leave them unattended. I think that's the greatest crime anybody can commit.
You talk about the social contract. Is there any such thing? Is there any such concept in governance in Nigeria?
That's actually what democracy is. That is what it should be. Is it practicable here? Are Nigerians true to the oath they swore? Are they responsible and responsive? Do they uphold the social contract? It's a very big question, and the answer sizably is no. I think that what we must begin to do, and that's exactly why I salute the effort of the Nigerian media. Since my teenage days, I found out that just about the major opposition establishment, as it were, the conscience of the people, is the media. Then the civil society, unfortunately, within the past 2.5 years, have become sizably complicit. I think that labor has gone to bed. I do sincerely think that the next thing for us to do is to begin to interrogate leadership, reawaken the conscience of our people, and begin to think about the ordinary people. Save and accept leadership makes the ordinary people the summum bonum of its trust. Save and accept will begin to address the Nigerian people as the reason governance and governments exist. Our search for the good republic will be distant.
All right, I heard a professor from one of the universities in the North Central a few days ago said that the way we are clamoring for restructuring in the country, it's okay. But even then, what we have now, if we work according to the specifications of our laws and all of that, we will still be prosperous as a nation. Now, he also brought out the issue of state governments. The real development of this country is in the hands of state governments. Do you share that thought?
I'd love to take on that, Professor Mike. I'd love to tell him that of the 16 federal republics in the world, ours is the only one that runs anti the intendments and normatives of democracy. I'd love to tell him that no state government controls her resources. I'd love to tell him that if you have a plantation of weed behind your house, you become the subject of police investigation. But if it is an oil well, your land automatically belongs to the federal government. I love to tell him that local governments are but sleeping ants in the equation, and then state governments are but beggarly appendages. I love to tell him that when we had true fiscal federalism, we had pyramids of granite, we had cocoa silos, we had a country that was functional. I love to tell him that the structure fell and our morals and addiction to hard work and creativity died when the federal government took over everything. And I love to tell him that countries like the United States of America went to war discussing issues about structure. That Switzerland fought 6 wars because they needed to get it right. And that Nigerians are agitating for restructuring because ownership must be enthroned as the programmatic in our national equation. Save and except that is done. I've heard people like the former president Olusegun Obasanjo talk about the need for the restructuring of the mind. On what premises will you restructure the mind? Mike, don't forget.
Isn't that a good place
that
to
the
start
Hobbesian Homo sapien was brutish, nasty, selfish, and life short.
In the state of nature.
Don't forget that state of nature was not corrected by preachments on positive morality, reworking, restructuring of the mind. Don't forget that what fixed that society and brought us civilization was laws. And when you talk about restructuring, you're talking about new normatives, laws.
Don't you
laws
think?
That
Don't
will
you
compel
think?
responsible and responsive action. Laws that will have everybody come before justice as equals, not what you have today. Save and except you rework it. The child who is growing up out there does not know why he has to behave right, because what the country enthrones is corruption. Your law, a sacred text, the Constitution, is first a lie.
Let me come in here,
The people agreed. We never did. That's a lie. That's corruption. If what we're sitting on, our corruption is first a lie, then what we must do to make people act right is to correct it.
Okay.
So isn't that what the situation is now? Isn't it a restructuring of the mind that is already making us begin to talk about restructuring, whether it's political or economic in the first place?
You don't put the cart before the horse. You put the horse before the cart.
Is it not that we've woken up to this now? But let me leave that aside so we don't get off completely. Now, state governors have been criticized of actually abdicating their statutory roles and obligations and tying it to this so-called Paris, fund refund. I wonder what your take is on that. More like they're taking, holding federal government to ransom.
Let me tell you, for as long as you have what we have, the state governments will look for every way, every means to either hold the federal government by the jugular or make governance difficult at that level, because they understand the true programmatic. If you say you're a federal enterprise, then give us our rights. But I do sincerely believe that the way to go is to continue and to consistently ask the state governors to do what is right, to pay workers. And I do sincerely think that the right thing to do is for labor to rise to the urgency of now and protect workers. And I do believe that for those who run churches and Marxists, the time to begin to prick the conscience of leadership is now. Right. We must begin to make the ordinary people the summum bonum in terms of leadership.
All right. Professor Chris Mokobia, Director General, Change Ambassadors of Nigeria. Thanks for coming on the program.
The pleasure's mine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.